The desperate transmission. The crystalline towers of Valara shattered like glass beneath the Krovan bombardment. Elder scientist Thex watched from the underground command bunker as another wave of plasma fire turned their beautiful capital city into molten ruins. The Zelathi had been a peaceful species for over 3,000 years. They had devoted themselves to art, science, and philosophy. War was something they studied in history texts, not something they practiced. The Krovan Dominion had arrived 6 days ago with a simple message: surrender your technology and submit to slavery, or face annihilation. The Zelathi had tried to negotiate, to reason with them. They offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, anything except submission. The Krovans responded by destroying their orbital stations and beginning systematic bombardment of population centers. Thex turned to his assistant, young scientist Keela, who was frantically working at an ancient console that hadn't been powered in centuries. The machine was a relic from their species' violent past, before they had chosen the path of peace. It was an emergency beacon, designed to send a universal distress signal to any spacefaring civilization within range. "Is it working?" Thex asked, his 4 eyes reflecting the orange glow of fires burning above ground. "The power cells are degraded, but I think I can get one transmission out," Kayla replied. Her tentacle-like fingers danced across the controls with desperate precision. "Elder, the translation matrix is damaged. I cannot guarantee the message will be properly formatted in all languages." "Send it anyway," Thex commanded. "We have nothing to lose." The beacon hummed to life, drawing power from their last functioning reactor. Keela had programmed it to send a simple message in what their computers identified as the most common galactic trade languages. What she didn't know was that the damaged translation matrix had corrupted parts of the message, particularly the section that was supposed to clarify they were requesting humanitarian aid, not military assistance. The message that burst from Valara read, "Critical threat to galactic stability. Peaceful Federation under assault by hostile forces. Immediate intervention required. Coordinates attached. Species survival at stake. Any able civilizations, please respond." In the Sol system, the message arrived at 3 different locations simultaneously. Luna Base picked it up first, followed by the Mars Colonial Defense Network, and finally Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station in Antarctica. The corrupted translation had transformed their plea for humanitarian aid into what sounded like a desperate military alliance, calling for immediate tactical support. Lieutenant Commander Zhang Wei was on duty at Luna Base when the transmission arrived. She read it 3 times before calling her superior. The message seemed to suggest that a peaceful galactic federation was under attack, and they were calling for any military assistance available. "Sir, we've received an unusual transmission," she reported to Admiral Foster. "It appears to be a distress call from a previously unknown civilization. They claim to be part of a peaceful federation under hostile assault." Admiral Foster, a veteran of humanity's colonial conflicts, read the message carefully. Federation suggested multiple worlds. Critical threat to galactic stability implied this was more than a local dispute. His mind immediately went to historical parallels of aggressive empires crushing smaller nations, while others stood by and did nothing. "How far away is this signal source?" he asked. "Approximately 45 light-years, sir. With our new jump drives, we could reach them in 36 hours. Admiral Foster made a decision that would change galactic history. "Send an immediate response. Tell them help is coming. Then contact Earth Command. I'm recommending we invoke the Halifax Protocol." The Halifax Protocol was humanity's doctrine for responding to humanitarian crises and defensive wars. It had been created after humanity's bloody history taught them the cost of standing by while innocents suffered. The protocol called for immediate and overwhelming response to prevent genocide and protect civilian populations. Within 6 hours, Earth's government had approved the largest military mobilization since the Mars Independence War. The message from Valara had struck a chord with humanity. They saw themselves in these unknown aliens, a peaceful people facing destruction from aggressive forces. Ships began gathering at the assembly point near Neptune. The dreadnought Thunder of Terra, pride of Earth's fleet, arrived first. Captain Rebecca Martinez stood on her bridge, watching as more vessels jumped in every few minutes. Cruisers from Mars, destroyers from the Belt Colonies, even private military contractors were answering the call. "Captain, the Lunar Defense Force just arrived," her tactical officer reported. "That makes 112 ships so far." Martinez nodded grimly. And more are coming. The colony worlds are sending everything they can spare. She had read the translated message dozens of times. These aliens, whoever they were, had made a desperate plea for help. The thought of a peaceful federation being crushed by aggressors went against everything humanity had learned from its own violent history. Back on Valara, the Krovan ground forces had begun landing. General Krax led the invasion personally, confident in quick victory. The Zalathi had no standing army, only a small peacekeeping force that was already overwhelmed. Civilians fled in terror as Krovan warriors marched through the streets, their battle armor impervious to the few weapons the Zalathi possessed. In the bunker, Thex received a notification that made his heart skip. "Elder, we have received a response to our beacon." The message was short and in a language their computers could only partially translate. "Valara, this is Earth Combined Fleet. Your message received. Military assistance en route. Estimated arrival 35 hours. Hold your position. Protect civilians. We are coming." Kayla looked confused. "Earth, military assistance?" "Elder, we asked for humanitarian aid, not military intervention." Thex studied the message. The translation matrix was damaged. "We may have sent a different message than intended. Should we send a clarification?" Before Thex could answer, another explosion rocked their bunker. The Krovans were getting closer. "No," he decided. "Any help is better than none. Even if they only evacuate some civilians, it will be worth it." Neither of them could imagine what was actually coming their way. The concept of a species mobilizing over 100 warships to help complete strangers was beyond their comprehension. The Zalathi had been peaceful for so long, they had forgotten that some species treated the defense of innocence as a sacred duty. As the hours passed, more human ships joined the fleet. The agricultural world of Haven sent their entire defense fleet, 12 ships that were supposed to protect their grain shipments. The mining stations around Jupiter contributed 6 heavy assault craft designed for asteroid braking, but easily converted to combat roles. Even the science vessel Carl Sagan volunteered, her crew of researchers refusing to stand by while innocents suffered. Admiral Foster, now commanding the combined fleet from the Thunder of Terra, watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. 157 ships had answered the call. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled for a single operation. "All ships, this is Admiral Foster," he broadcast to the fleet. "We've received a distress call from a peaceful federation under attack. We don't know these people. We've never met them. But they've asked for our help and humanity answers. We go in fast, we hit hard, and we protect those who cannot protect themselves. That's who we are. That's who we've chosen to be." The fleet jumped as one, hurtling through space toward Valara. In their wake, they left a humanity united in purpose for the first time in decades. The old rivalries between Earth, Mars, and the colonies had been set aside. When innocents called for help, humanity would answer with everything they had. When humanity answers, the Krovan fleet hung in orbit around Valara like predators circling wounded prey. Admiral Thorne stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Decimator, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The planet below was nearly conquered. Only a few pockets of resistance remained, and they would fall within hours. "Admiral, we're detecting a massive gravitational distortion at the edge of the system," his sensor operator suddenly reported, voice tight with concern. "Clarify massive," Thorne ordered. "Multiple contacts, sir, dozens. No, over 100 separate distortion signatures." Before Thorne could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Ship after ship emerged from jump space, each one broadcasting identification signals in an unknown language. The Krovan tactical computer struggled to process what it was seeing. Where they had expected perhaps a small relief force, an entire armada had appeared. Admiral Foster stood calmly on the bridge of Thunder of Terra as his fleet completed their jump. The sight that greeted them was worse than the message had implied. A planet burned below them, cities in ruins, and 23 Krovan warships maintaining orbital superiority while ground forces terrorized the population. "All ships, this is Foster. Weapons free. Priority targets are ships conducting orbital bombardment. Marine transports prepare for combat drops. Let's show these bastards what happens when they attack innocents." The human fleet moved like a swarm of angry hornets. The Krovans, caught completely off guard by the size of the response, scrambled to respond. They had conquered dozens of worlds, but never had they faced such an immediate and overwhelming counterattack. Captain Martinez brought the Thunder of Terra into weapons range first. Target their flagship. Full broadside. The dreadnought's railguns spoke in thunder and fury. Projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed slammed into the decimator's shields, overloading them in seconds. The Krovan flagship, built to intimidate smaller species, found itself facing weapons designed by a species that had perfected war through centuries of fighting themselves. Across the void, similar scenes played out. The Mars destroyer Red Sand unleashed swarms of nuclear-tipped missiles. The colony ship turned battlecruiser New Horizons, deployed fighter squadrons that descended on Krovan vessels like ancient cavalry charges. Even the science vessel Carl Sagan contributed, using her powerful sensors to paint targets for other ships. In his bunker on Valara, Elder Thex watched in stunned amazement as the orbital display showed Krovan ships disappearing one by one. "What are they?" he whispered. "The computer identifies them as humans," Kayla reported, equally shocked. "Elder, they brought over 150 ships. For us, they don't even know us." The Krovan ground forces received frantic messages from their fleet. The invasion force that had seemed invincible was being systematically destroyed. General Krax, leading the ground assault, couldn't believe what he was hearing. "How many ships?" he demanded over the communication link. "Over 150, General. They came out of nowhere. We've lost half our fleet already." Before Krax could respond, the sky above him lit up with streaks of fire. Drop pods, hundreds of them, were falling from orbit. The human marine transports had reached low orbit and were deploying their ground forces. Sergeant Major Cooper hit the ground running, his powered armor absorbing the impact of the combat drop. Around him, his Marines spread out with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this scenario countless times, a combat drop into an urban environment to protect civilians. "Remember, people," Cooper broadcast to his unit, "civilians are priority one. Any gray-skinned, four-eyed beings are friendlies. The hostiles are the big reptilian bastards in black armor. Weapons-free Marines. Let's show them how humanity deals with bullies." The counter-invasion was swift and brutal. Human Marines, products of a species that had unfortunately perfected ground combat through millennia of practice, hit the Krovan forces like a sledgehammer. The Krovans, used to fighting poorly armed peacekeepers or unarmed civilians, found themselves facing soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons designed to punch through tank armor. In the capital city, a group of Zalathi civilians huddled in a damaged building, surrounded by Krovan warriors who were deciding their fate. The warriors laughed at the terrified aliens enjoying their power over the helpless. Then the wall exploded. Marine Corporal Lisa Chen stepped through the breach, her armor's weapon systems already targeting the surprised Krovans. "Step away from the civilians," she ordered through her suit's translation system. The lead Krovan warrior raised his weapon. He never got to fire it. Chen's rail rifle punched through his armor like paper. The other Krovans tried to scatter, but more Marines had already surrounded the building. In seconds, it was over. Chen approached the terrified Zalathi civilians, her armor's speakers switching to a gentler tone. "You're safe now. We're here to help. Can you understand me?" One of the Zalathi, a young teacher named Silex, nodded slowly. You came? But we don't know you. Why would you come?" Chen's response would be remembered in Zalathi history for generations. "Because you asked for help. Because you needed us. That's enough." Across Valara, similar scenes played out. Human Marines landed in force, systematically crushing Krovan ground forces while carefully protecting Zalathi civilians. Medical teams followed close behind, setting up field hospitals to treat the wounded. Engineering units began emergency repairs on critical infrastructure. In orbit, the battle was already over. The Krovan fleet had been reduced to debris. Admiral Thorne's escape pod was captured by the cruiser Vigilant, and he was brought before Admiral Foster for questioning. "Why?" Thorne asked, genuinely confused. "Why would you commit such forces for strangers? What do you gain?" Foster looked at the defeated alien admiral with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You wouldn't understand. You see the galaxy as predator and prey. We see it as a community. When someone calls for help, decent people answer. That's what makes us human." Within 18 hours, Valara was liberated. The Krovan forces were either destroyed or captured. The Zalathi, emerging from their shelters, looked upon their saviors with a mixture of awe and confusion. These humans had traveled across the stars, brought a massive fleet, and risked their lives for complete strangers. Elder Thex was brought to meet Admiral Foster aboard the Thunder of Terra. The elderly Zalathi scientist stood in the massive warship's conference room, surrounded by human officers trying to understand what had happened. "Admiral Foster," Thex began, his translator working to convey his words, "I must confess something. Our distress beacon was damaged. We meant to ask for humanitarian aid, medical supplies, perhaps evacuation assistance. We never meant to call for military intervention of this scale." Foster smiled. "Elder Thex, we received a call for help from a peaceful people under attack. The scale of our response was our choice. We've learned from our own history that when genocide threatens, half measures save no one. But the cost, the risk to your people. Every human ship came here voluntarily," Captain Martinez interjected. "When we heard your message, when we understood that innocents were dying, we couldn't stand by. It's not in our nature anymore." Thex's 4 eyes filled with moisture, the Zalathi equivalent of tears. "We have been peaceful for 3 millennia. We had forgotten that such selfless courage existed in the universe." "You chose peace," Foster replied. "That's admirable. We chose to become the shield for those who make that choice. Different paths, but both necessary." The meeting was interrupted by Lieutenant Commander Zhang Wei. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from 17 different species. They all want to know why humanity deployed such a massive fleet." Foster turned to Thex. "What should we tell them?" Thex straightened, his voice carrying new strength. "Tell them the truth. Tell them that when the peaceful called for help, humanity answered. Tell them that there are those who still believe in protecting the innocent." The liberation of Valara sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity as a young, irrelevant civilization suddenly realized that these humans possessed both the power and the will to intervene on a massive scale. The Krovan Dominion, learning that their invasion fleet had been annihilated, quickly retreated from several other systems they had been threatening. But more importantly, hope spread among the peaceful species of the galaxy. They were not alone. There was someone who would answer if they called for help. 3 months later, Valara had become a symbol of something new in galactic politics. The Zalathi, grateful beyond words, had formed a formal alliance with humanity. Other peaceful species, inspired by humanity's intervention, began reaching out. A new federation was forming, not based on military might or economic power, but on a simple principle that humanity had learned through centuries of blood and struggle. Those who can protect those who cannot. Should Elder Thex stood in his rebuilt laboratory, looking at the old distress beacon that had saved his people. Kayla stood beside him, working on a new project. "What are you building?" he asked. "A new beacon," she replied, "but not for distress. This one will broadcast a different message." "What message?" Kayla smiled, her 4 eyes bright with hope. "That we are not alone. That there are those who stand guard in the dark. That when the peaceful call for help, humanity sends an armada." The beacon activated, sending its message across the stars, and in the Sol system, humanity stood ready, not as conquerors or empire builders, but as guardians who had learned the most important lesson of all. With great power comes the choice of how to use it, and humanity had chosen to be the shield, not the sword.